अब मैं इवेंट का बाकायदा आगाज करता हूँ. So I would like to invite Ms. Nusra Shahid from Integration Expert. Please have a big hand for us.
And as you have already heard, today I'll be talking about sharing some of my knowledge regarding feature engineering and augmentation. So before we start, let me introduce myself a little. I graduated from NED University in 2017, and for 1.5 years I was working as a research and development engineer. And just recently, 3 months back, I joined Integration Experts. At LFD, I was working on computer vision projects mostly, and at Integration Experts, I've been able to explore a little time series forecasting and predictive modeling, etc. So in this session, I'll be discussing different topics ranging from features and what are features and feature engineering, the iterative process behind feature engineering, and what is the importance of it. Also, we'll be discussing why domain knowledge is necessary to execute this process, and what exactly is data augmentation. So I would advise you guys to note down your questions along with the slide numbers, and I'll be happy to take them at the end of the session. So, when you get your hands on data, so what exactly are features? When you get your hands on data, you must have heard the words such as observations and attributes. So each record, for example, such as a patient record in a hospital, can be considered as an observation, whereas it has multiple attributes. So if you see on the right, if you see a small snippet of the Pokemon dataset, it shows that each row is an observation, whereas the columns are the attributes. So what features are? Features are those attributes that are meaningful. So you can use some or all of these features, all of these attributes as features in your data. If you have images as observation, there are eyes, eyebrows, wrinkles, and different lines that can be used as features when you have images as the observations. So there's this whole, like you have an observation, in that you have multiple attributes, and in those particular attributes you can find the meaningful ones, those are your features. So for example, if I tell you to predict the grades of these students based on their pictures only, can you do that?
No.
Can you do that?
No.
No, you cannot. So what if I provide you with their age, number of siblings, and height? Now, can you predict their grades? No, you can't. So, and in the last, I give you their study hours and their punctuality scores.
Yeah.
Now, can you do it?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. So there's from this trivial example, you can understand that from your corpus of data, you can have a lot of attributes, but then you have to find the ones that actually fit for your problem. So now that we know what features are, what exactly is feature engineering? Feature engineering provides you with the best representation of your data for your model. So it's actually a process that transforms your feature into a set that can be easily interpreted, modeled, and understood. The process behind feature engineering is an iterative one. So it's a try and test thing. So first of all, you brainstorm your features from your corpus of data. You see what you can, you come up with the problems and the use cases that can be done through it, and you see what you can steal from it. The second step, you devise different techniques to extract those features either manually or automatically. In the third step, you select those features. You choose a feature selection method to select those features that can be and make different views for your model. And in the last, you evaluate your model based on a test data, and you see that how the model performs. If it performs well, then you go ahead with that feature set. Otherwise, you reiterate the process again. Since when you go through that iterative process in the feature engineering, there are there are a number of types of features that you come across. So there could be, in the tabular data, you could have numeric, categorical, or datetime features, or you could, for the pictorial data, you could have an array of pixel values, edges, descriptors, and for textual data, you could have word count and embeddings. So there are multiple kind of ways to deal with these kind of features, and we'll be discussing a couple of them in the next few slides. So if you have numeric data can be continuous or discrete. So what you do is when you have numeric data, you actually this is an example from a challenge that there was it was present in the last few months. And the training data was provided for a driver scoring model. So there were parameters such as speed, acceleration, gyro readings, etc. What we did, the data, how it was present was in the form of different rides. For example, if each ride was 60 seconds long, so there were 60 rows for that whole ride. So we had to summarize, we had to come up with a summarization technique. So we took mean and minimum and maximum for the whole ride, and we came up with a summary of that each trip. So then after the summarization, we had one single row for whole trip. After that, what we did was we had to find which features were were related or could be used in our model. So we used a feature selection method called correlation. So what correlation actually is, it is a statistical measure that tells you how your features fluctuate together. So here you can see that we have. Can you guys see the name of the features?
Yes.
You can. So we had you can see that we had speed and acceleration and then the gyro readings. So the diagonal that you see over here is for the correlation values of the feature, but itself, so obviously it's going to be 1. And the orange boxes, so that shows you that where there is positive correlation, whereas the blues show you that where there is negative correlation. So this kind of a correlation plot helps you in two things. It helps you identify the relation of the independent variables with the target variables, and secondly, it helps you find out the relations of the features amongst themselves. So, for example, here if you see on the top, there are two orange boxes. The maximum speed and the mean speed are correlated to each other, very positively correlated to each other. So, what you can, it is advised to look through them and usually pick one that would suffice. The second thing that you can do with your numeric features is create a range. So, for example, if your features can be built into a range, and it can have a particular characteristic. So, for example, here you can say that 10 to 19 age groups can be used for physical activities. The age group from 20 to 29 can be used for load lifting, and for the 30 to 39 can volunteer for the office desk work. So here you are creating bins of your data. So this technique is called binning or bucketing, where you create different ranges of your data, and where this actually helps in minimizing the noise from your learning model. Now, after the numeric data, you can have categorical data. In the categorical data, you have, for example, on the left hand side, you have the car company names. So, in the car company names, there's Honda, Acura, and Volkswagen. So, there are 3 companies, and along with there is their categorical value. You cannot feed the name of the companies and their categorical values into the model. What you do is you encode this data. So there are different techniques for encoding. Here I'll explain one, that is one-hot encoding. In one-hot encoding, what you do is you create a binary column for each category, which can have a value 1 or 0. So for Honda and for Volkswagen, Honda and Acura, you'll have separate 3 columns, and where the category is 1, you'll have 1 in that particular cell, and then where it's not present, you'll have a 0. This technique is called one-hot encoding. Also, there are a couple of times when your features make more sense collectively rather than individually. So what you do is, for example, longitude and latitude. So what you do is you take cross product of those features. So here you can see that what we have done is first the red and the blue points are the features as is without being cross product together. So first we create the bins. For example, from 0 to 3, there is on the x-axis from 0 to 3 there is one bin, and from 0 to -3, from -3 to 0 there is this other bin. So what it does, it separates divides your whole data set into 4 quadrants. And then what you can do is you can then take cross products of your data, and the circle data points that you see are those cross products. So this technique is called feature crosses, where you can make sense of the features collectively rather than individually. Okay. So a lot of times you have date time data in your data set. So you have, for example, date for a particular sale. What you do with the date is like you divide that date into 3 columns, into year, month, and date. And if you have a timestamp as well, what you do is like you divide it into hours, minutes, and seconds. So for example, if you have a date column, you'll have now 3 columns for that single date column. And also from the date you can also drive features such as was it a weekday or a weekend, or what time of the day it was, night or morning, etc. So now numeric we have done, categorical, and for the images what you do is when you have observations as images, what you do is there are a couple of classical computer vision techniques which help you extract the features from the images manually. And when we talk about CNNs, the convolutional neural nets, what they do is in the CNN there is actually convolutional layers prior to the neural net. So before the dense layers there are convolutional layers which helps you extract the features automatically. So on the right hand side, the images that you see are the visualization of the convolutional layer itself. So here you can see that it is capturing the patterns in the image on the left hand side, and with these patterns it helps you determine or classify the images. So when you talk about the importance of feature engineering, what it does, it helps you understand the structure of your data and the problem that you have in hand. It also helps you find out the relationship between the independent and the dependent variables, and it also assists you in building simpler models with better performance. So whatever you saw before, for all this to execute, you have to have domain knowledge. So what is domain knowledge? Domain knowledge is the prior knowledge that you need for a particular project. So in this, I'll explain that. I'll try to explain it with the help of 2 case studies. So for example, we had machine learning in the medicine is the best example for why domain knowledge is necessary. Here you can see that we have multiple snippets from the MRI of heart. So what problem we had was that we had to identify the iron deposition in the heart of the thalassaemic patients. So to give you a background, thalassemia is a blood disorder, genetic blood disorder, in which because of continuous blood transfusions there is iron deposition in different organs. So hence there is a very critical need to identify the right time when there is the deposition, and you have to treat the patients correctly according to it. So what we were doing, we got the MRIs, and we were reading the research papers, we were going through stuff, and we had our facts listed down. But to get those facts straight, we had to go to a domain expert because and because we were wrong at so many places, we made so many wrong assumptions because they told us that we had to focus only on one type of angle of the heart in these images. So the one that you see at the bottom is the short axis of the heart. So this is the only image that we have to focus. Also in this, we have to focus only on a certain region of interest and monitor that for to find out the iron deposition in different organs. In the next case study, if you see that we had the problem of identifying recurring customers in the retail store. So recurring customers are those which come again. So why do you think would a retailer want to know the recurring customers? Any guesses?
What?
Come again?
Suggestions, to give suggestions
Suggestions to
of
the,
products.
to give the customers, the loyal customers, more suggestions, right? Okay, so that's what we thought as well, because we think from consumer perspective, so we thought that they have to identify their loyal customers and give them more particular deals and etc. But we were wrong, because you see that the most important thing that in their marketing or the promotion campaigns that they have is they are successful only when they drive new customers. So a marketing campaign or a promotion is rated higher when it is able to drive more customers into the store. So that is the reason you are supposed to, you are supposed to know the domain knowledge behind the problem that you are dealing with. Because what it does is this exercise will help you, help you understand the problem better and like appear trustworthy and confident in front of your client. So these are, this is why domain knowledge is necessary. It helps you identify the solution and give you ideas about the problem that you have in hand. It gives you a check and balance of the facts and figures. Helps you identify the outliers and also for fine tuning and making your performance of the model better. When we have data augmentation. How many of you know what exactly is the data augmentation? Okay. So the image data augmentation is actually increasing the size of your data set by artificially creating new examples from your existing data set. So for example, if I have an image of a giraffe, I just have 10 images and I want to do something with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce some positional augmentation. I'm going to tilt it, shift or rotate, and then this is going to introduce some changes in the position of the object. Also what I can do is I can change the color scale of the object, such as change it to binary or grayscale, or introduce different kind of noise. This will help me, for example, if I use tilt and color augmentation, this will make my dataset from 10 to 30. So this is how it increases the scale of your dataset. If I explain this to you with the help of case study again, so there was this dataset from Stanford, the CARS dataset, which does, and there were like 200 classes. So there were 8,000 images for 200 classes. So if you do a rough calculation, there were 40 images per class, which are not enough for a CNN model. So what we did was we did some augmentation over there, performed some tilting, shifting, etc. And we ended up with 16,000 images, which is still not much for a deep learning model, but we were at least able to improve the accuracy a little. This graph can explain you that how the size of the data matter for the deep learning models. So the non-linear machine learning models and the deep learning models, their performance is linearly connected to the amount of data that you have. So the greater amount of data that you will have, you'll be able to train your models better. But the thing that you need to keep in mind is you're not only supposed to focus on the quantity of your data, you'll also have to keep a check on the quality of the data. Then only you can make your models perform better. That would be it from my side. I'll be happy.